It Hi folks. It is 2:34 and we're going to get started. As folks come in, I'm sure they'll, get clued into what's going on. Welcome. My name is Galina Varchena and I'm the Policy Director for Birth in Color RVA. And I hope there are other panelists, Khenia, LaTwyla, and Chloe. There we go. Awesome. Well, pop on their cameras. I will let everyone introduce themselves, but the kind of topic of this webinar is how can you vote since we're only a few days away from the election, and why you should vote and should tell all of your friends, family, enemies, frenemies, whomever to also go out and vote in this particular election in Virginia, why it is so important for reproductive rights, reproductive justice, for birth justice, for all of the things that we care so much about. So let me start by letting the panelists introduce themselves. Let's start with Khenia. And then Khenia, if you wouldn't mind passing it on to the next one.
Yes, thank you so much, Galina. As was mentioned, my name is Khenia Haro-Perez. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I serve as the Virginia State Manager for the Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice. Apologies. We're mostly based out of Northern Virginia, but we do work all over the Commonwealth, just providing education, materials, resources, and trainings on reproductive justice, and what that intersection looks like, especially as it relates to Latina communities, immigration justice, and language justice. Happy to be here.
And pass it on to LaTwyla.
Thank you, Galina. Hi, everybody. My name is LaTwyla Mathias, and I'm Executive Director of Progress Virginia. My pronouns are she, her. We are the communications, digital, and disinformation hub for the Commonwealth. We lift up stories on the ground and what's happening on the grassroots, and we are a multi-issue organization working across the Commonwealth to promote advocacy, social justice, and all of the issues that we're going to be talking about here today. Thank you to our longtime partners at Birth in Color for hosting this very timely and important conversation. And with that, I will pass it to Chloe.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe. I use she, her, we pronouns. I'm the policy director at New Virginia Majority. We are one of the state's largest civic engagement organizations, in particular, organizing working class people of color, women specifically, to transform the systems that are no longer working for us. And I specialize in the intersections of public health and racial and social justice. And I'll pass the mic back to you, Galina.
Fantastic. So starting off with the big question. This is an off-year election, so we're not voting for president, we're not voting for governor. Why is participation so important in off-year elections, especially in Virginia, and especially for issues that affect marginalized communities? And what is on the ballot during this election that matters to your organization, to your reproductive justice, and to you personally? Whoever wants to start.
I guess I can kick things off. Again, this is Khenia. I think that this election, it cannot be overstated enough how important it is to go out and vote, especially as it relates to marginalized communities, as you mentioned, Galina, because a lot hinges on this election, right? A lot hinges on it because there's a lot of attacks right now on bodily autonomy that we're seeing in Virginia. Just this past session, we saw the increase in the amount of just abortion bans that were being introduced into the legislature for passage. They weren't passed because thankfully we have enough pro-abortion legislators in office right now that can help us kind of hold the line, if you will, and allow for more bills that more bans that get introduced to not get passed. But we had a total of about, just in bans, 14 abortion bans alone in 2023, and we expect to see way more come up in 2024. And if we don't have the pro-abortion majority that we are looking for, then we are vulnerable to a lot of attacks, right? We're going to be vulnerable to all of these attacks on our bodily autonomy in the legislature. And we want to have the reinforcements in order to lead the conversation in the way that we want to continue the culture shift work that we're doing as far as abortion and bodily autonomy is concerned. And in order to keep doing that, we want to be able to have enough reinforcements to do that. And so it's important for everyone to go out and vote during this election season in order to get the bills that we want in the 2024 legislature, and in order to make sure that our voices are accounted for. It's a budget year in 2024, so we really want to make sure that our voices in our communities are being accounted for, especially as it relates to the budget and money allocation. And so that's a very long-winded way of saying it, but I think in terms of the legislature, it's supremely important that people go out to vote, because the General Assembly session will be affected by that.
Yeah, I'll hop in next. Like Khenia said, it cannot be overstated enough how important this election is, but it's also important to note that every single election, from Soil and Water Commissioner all the way up to President of the United States, is important. And this one is no different, right? So we, Galina, you mentioned, why do we want our friends, family, enemies to vote? Plainly because they don't want us to. In addition to the abortion bans that we saw over 20 bills that tried to limit the right to vote. And we had strong legislators in there to block those, because we know that voting is one of the most important things that you can do as a citizen of this country. And we want to make sure that those rights are protected, along with a litany of other issues that I know that we're going to get into during this conversation, and why they're important to the Commonwealth and the future of the Commonwealth for future generations to come. So we want everybody to vote, because, simply put, they don't want you to vote. And so we're going to, push back on that and say, yes, we want to vote. We want to exercise our civic duty. We want to make our voices heard, and we want to make sure that we affect the change that will affect not only our lives, but the lives of our family, our friends, and all of those other people that you mentioned.
Thank you. Well said. And outside of that, I'd say New Virginia Majority, we're a C3, also a C4 endorsement organization. Part of that strategy is really rooted in our theory of change to, one, get more, in particular, women of color or more progressive people in office. And so we door knock thousands of doors to really mobilize around communities who do have more disadvantages in running for public office as it relates to resource or social capital, et cetera. Two, once we get those people in office, it really contributes to the political makeup of our General Assembly, what happens after the elections. And so these are people that can carry and champion our legislation, our progressive legislation, and many of them have agreed to support some of the issues that our base, our community membership really desires to affect change. And so outside of that, I'd say every seat is up for re-election this year, the Senate, the House. This is the off year of the presidential election. So lots of people know, when I tell them I work in this field, they ask me about, Congress or the president, but there's also those state elections and some of those local offices that matter. And so on these years, we typically have lower voter turnout. And then moving from that, we have a system of checks and balances. So, for example, our governor is a conservative right now. Then we have our House, which right now is led by mostly Republicans, and then our Senate is led by Democrats. And so, because of that system of checks and balances, some of the issues that you're hearing my colleagues state here have been shut down because they couldn't get through the Senate or something of that sort. With redistricting, both of the House and the Senate, we're guessing, based off our political analysis, both of those chambers could go either way. It could be led by Dems, it could be led by Republicans, and so it's a very close turnout. However, if it transforms to the latter, perhaps led by conservatives, that system of checks and balances, some of the issues that the last administration, et cetera, have worked on, all of that is at risk. And then we're also still seeing voter disenfranchisement. Maybe some of you have heard what's happening in particular with felony disenfranchisement. Right now, thousands of people left out of their right to vote, and we're still doing some education to let them know, hey, check your status, et cetera. And so it very much is still a privilege in that sense, and I encourage people to go out and vote.
So I think we kind of started on this question already, but I know we hear a lot about abortion and how Virginia is, right, the last state in the South without big restrictions on abortion, or that hasn't passed restrictions on abortion after Dobbs, although we do have some. What other issues related to reproductive justice are affected by who is in our state and local legislatures that we should really think about when voting?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Every issue is intersectional, basically. So reproductive justice is the topic of the day, but what is on the ballot this November is also climate justice, it's also economic justice. You know, these are issues that are trying to protect the holistic person in the Commonwealth. And so, you know, we have a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck. We want to make sure that they are earning a livable wage. We want to make sure that our climate is protected for future generations to come. We are also fighting for reproductive justice and to protect Virginia as a state that protects abortion rights. So like just a couple of those issues I named, but all of the issues on the ballot are up this November. And it's really critical that we all go out and vote so we can elect leaders who will fight for those issues, who will make sure that we have the Commonwealth that we want to see.
I think I would jump in to also say, sorry, that I think particularly within, as I mentioned before, in its intersection with the Latina Institute Immigration Justice, the Latina Institute has research polling that we pulled 2022 and from 2023, but from 2022, it was the most, I guess, glaring part of the research that of all the Latinas, the people that identify as Latina in the Commonwealth of Virginia, half of them are foreign born. And so what does that look like in terms of people that seek refuge in Virginia, immigrant communities that seek housing in Virginia, and how they will be affected by everything on the ballot, right? Like, what does housing reform look like in Virginia when two cities in Virginia, namely Norfolk and Richmond, have, lead the country in evictions, right? And its intersection with immigrant communities and them finding homes after being displaced in their own homes, right? Northern Virginia has a huge immigrant population, especially as it refers to people seeking asylum. And so what does that look like also in terms of healthcare disparities, right? Because we know that Medicaid for all, and the 400,000 people that it covered did not cover undocumented immigrants and their families. And so what does that look like in terms of providing services, healthcare, resources to immigrant communities, especially since Virginia really leads as a state in opening its doors to refugees and to immigrant communities and to being such a multicultural place. It has really prided itself in that. And so what is up for the ballot in terms of how it'll affect immigrant communities is hugely top of mind.
Thank you. And I'll just chime in a little more. On that same token, Virginia as a state has, for example, expanded the ability for undocumented women to have access to health insurance during childbirth and postpartum. However, we're still fighting for covering all kids, regardless of their immigration status. There's currently, I want to say the number 13,000 children that do not have access to long-term healthcare coverage. So that's something that we continue to make more leeway on, but still we see these issues tend to be politicized. There was also Language Equity and Access Act that tried to pass, I want to say it was 2020, 2021. But again, we find that these issues still tend to be political in Virginia. There's also a significant community-based healthcare workforce that we saw funding prioritized during the pandemic. People were wondering, oh my gosh, why won't people get vaccinated? Why don't they trust our healthcare system? Certain things were used Google Translate to translate vaccination instructions, et cetera. And so while a lot of funding came in from the CDC and that was prioritized to community health workers, community-based health workforce, that funding is now being prioritized for more of the licensed healthcare providers. So we're still going back to the good old Virginia way, in the sense that we really haven't learned our lessons and are continuing the status quo continues to persist in the country. There are still also other services like access to health insurance in carceral settings for people in general, but in particular, birthing people who are incarcerated, paid family medical leave when you think about being able to take time off for these, or parental time off too, for these important milestones in life. Still advocating for a diverse mental health workforce, in particular, when we think about postpartum depression, et cetera. And so there's tons of issues that are intersectional that we still have a lot more work to be done here.
And I know that it's not just the state office, right? The statewide offices and the legislature, the state legislature, but local elections are also super important. Where can people find information around the views of their local and state candidates, especially in some of the local elections, like for school board, etc., who are running on platitudes without an easily discernible platform or party affiliation? Where can folks learn who they should vote for, who will support their values?
I love this question. Progress Virginia puts together a voter guide every year. We have candidate recommendations all the way up and down the ballot. It is progressive. So we do highlight and make recommendations on who is the most progressive candidate in the race. And that comes in play really critically in those races that are nonpartisan, where it's hard to differentiate between the candidates sometimes if you're not paying attention. I'm thinking about Board of Supervisor races, city council races, school board races, where we've seen a lot of action, especially in the past couple of years, around the whole parental rights movement. So those races are where the battle lines are being drawn lately. So it's important to be voting in those down ballot races and making sure that you're educated on what the issues are. So that's where our voter guide comes into play. Our voter guide can be found at progressivevotersguide.org. So check it out if you have any questions. And yeah, shout out to our team for putting that together. We research and write every recommendation ourselves, so you know it's coming from a trusted messenger. But yeah.
And 𝘃cie, my policy fellow, just popped that into the chat in case you want to check it out. Now, the election is happening next Tuesday. What are things people can do to actively engage in the process if they want to support candidates or participate in get out the vote efforts, given like this very short period of time?
I would also add New Virginia Majority. We too endorse progressive candidates. You can go to newvirginiamajority.org to find out. We're engaged in local elections as well as primarily state elections, but have some pilot projects we're doing in Loudoun and other localities around the state. We also have, you can participate in phone banking with our organization. You can also help canvass with our organization as well. And then there's also opportunities to volunteer at your local precinct if they need volunteers. You can also donate to a candidate, just ensuring their platform aligns with your values and beliefs. And those are just a few examples of how folks can get involved at this stage of the game, but we're all scrambling, so there's certainly still some support that could be needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback off of that, there is a ton happening over the next few days leading up to Tuesday and on Tuesday itself. If you are not a canvassing person, there is always a phone bank that you can join. There's also text banking happening this weekend. So there are ways for all people to get involved in this election. So don't be afraid to reach out to one of our fellow panelists or to our organization or anybody you know that's tangentially involved in this election and figure out a way to get involved, because it's that important.
Wonderful. So pivoting a little bit, in Virginia, we've seen not just efforts in the legislature, but also in certain localities, Loudoun springs to mind, among others, to restrict and Grayson County and Bristol County to restrict abortion rights, to change the way our kids learn in school, to attack our transgender and LGBTQ communities. How can local elections play a role in all of these kind of different efforts, and why are these efforts dangerous, and why are they dangerous not just for the people living in those counties, but also for Virginia as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up, Galina. I think it's also hugely important to mention because I think a lot of people, we don't have an abortion ban instituted in Virginia, but because of that, it gives localities the ability to institute ordinances within their county or city limits, right? And that's what we've been seeing in Grayson County, for example, where they've been instituting a lot of ordinances against abortion within their town lines, essentially, right? And so that's why local elections are hugely important, because you don't really think about like your city council or maybe your board of supervisors in these smaller rural counties along in Virginia. But these local board of supervisors are the ones that are green lighting essentially these conversations to be had at these board of supervisors meetings, for these votes to be had during city council meetings, and they will be, and they have been pushing through a lot of these anti-abortion ordinances within their city lines. And so it's hugely important to get involved in your local elections and to know what's happening, to make sure that within your local zoning city or no ordinances get brought up, right? And to stop what's been happening in places like Bristol and Grayson, right? I think it's also important because, I mean, we've said this enough, but I think it takes mentioning again that we are the only state in the South. So in the region, we are the only state that does not have an abortion ban currently. And we have 16 clinics. And so I just need to say that again to put into perspective to people that we are not only providing care to Virginians, but we are providing care to people in Tennessee, to people in North Carolina, to people in South Carolina. People get flown in from Florida, from Texas to receive care in Virginia. And so it takes overstating that, because even if it doesn't seem important that a local ordinance, anti-abortion ordinance just passed in Grayson or wherever else, it doesn't feel like it affects us. But Grayson is really close to parts of Tennessee, and Grayson is really close to other parts that touch Virginia, to where these people rely on coming into our state for care. And so it's hugely important to keep in mind how much these local ordinances affect us if we don't get involved and vote in our local city elections as well.
I agree. A lot of times things, may not pass at the state level, but you really got to look closely at the local level or vice versa. We see in particular school boards, some have been pushing back on, for example, the new model policies for trans youth that was pushed out by the Youngkin administration. And so that's a local election thing, really looking at more closely at the school board. Even when we think about education, there may be some Dillon rules as far as having more funding towards education using local sales tax exemptions, but that's a voter referendum that has to be passed at the local level, even with rent stabilization, with which New Virginia Majority is working on. Again, we can bypass the Dillon rule at the state level, but that's still going to be a local election. So you really need to make sure we're paying closely to our city council, our board of supervisor members and the policies they're pushing for. But I would also say these trends happening at the national level, they're toxic. And racism is a toxic disease in our system. When we see outcomes such as the school to prison pipeline, that's not the child's fault. That's a system of racism and how it permeates itself in our society. And so if we don't get involved, I would no longer accept the things I can't change. If we don't get involved, they won't change. And we'll still be looking at this same road we've traveled for the next 400 years.
I don't know if LaTwyla, you have anything else additional kind of add-on?
Yeah, the panelists hit the nail on the head. These special interest groups are fighting the war on every front possible. On the local level, on the state level, on the national level, they are coming at it from all sides, and they are determined, they are well-funded, and they are hungry. And, we have to be hungrier and more determined than they are, because otherwise we're not going to be able to live the life that we want to live in the Commonwealth. And, our colleagues on the panel said it, school board and board of supervisors, this is where it's happening. Those races are critical. You want to talk about book bans? We saw it on the state legislature, but we're seeing it on the local level too. All of these things are happening because if they want to do something, they'll say, oh, we could get X a number of localities out of the entire state. And then next thing you know, it's limited across the state for everybody. So it, like Khenia said, it affects all of us. If one county falls, that's one too many. So we need to make sure that we're ready and willing to fight on every level, just like they are.
Absolutely. And by the way, for anyone interested, there's some of us going to Grayson County in December to go and testify during that Board of Supervisors meeting around a bad anti-abortion ordinance. So if you're interested, please do let us know, and we'll give you some details. Going on to the next question. So low-income folks who are already marginalized, people living paycheck to paycheck, working multiple jobs, single moms, folks who are in a variety of circumstances, from physical issues, health issues, all sorts of things that are going on in people's lives, often don't have as much time as we do, since it's part of our job to really get engaged in politics throughout the year, and to keep up with it all. My God, I listen to news probably way too much for my mental health. But what are some easy ways for folks to kind of keep informed and keep a beat on things within their busy and overwhelming lives? And how can the folks who are watching help keep our communities informed and to engage when they can, and kind of when they have time and resources to do so? What are sort of the ways folks can reach out and the ways folks can engage? Anyone feel free to chime in.
I can start. I think some low effort things. I'm thinking right now, like we're limited in our capacity and what we can talk about and do as far as voting, right? At Latina Institute Virginia anyway, because we're a C3 org. However, like some low effort things that could still keep them up to pace with, like, politics or maybe policy level things for C3 purposes, but like to keep them up to date, I think the easiest thing, mostly everyone is connected on Facebook or on some sort of social media. And Latina Institute, for example, will release a lot of materials because we take language justice very seriously in our org, and all of our materials will always be provided, and the information that we provide will be provided in Spanish as well, monolingual Spanish. We also do a lot of Instagram lives with other partners in monolingual Spanish, like Equality Virginia and Catholics for Choice. We provide a lot of our resources and our information handouts in Spanish. And so what I would say is low effort, like sign up for alerts on Facebook from Latina Institute. And we always provide or try to provide as often as we can education, resources, and these lives in Spanish. So folks can, check us up on alerts. If they're already connected through Facebook or on Instagram, they can sign up for alerts and be alerted every time that we are giving out resources or education materials related to things that are happening currently, how they can get involved, early voting deadlines. It has passed now, right? But like we provided information on early voting deadlines, of where they can go vote, because, when you vote early, you can't vote everywhere. And so different things like that, we do provide information on, and they can sign up for those alerts on social media and get them from the Latina Institute and get them in monolingual Spanish as well. But just seeing where people are, especially marginalized communities, we have seen that people still communicate with the Latina Institute anyway, largely through Facebook or places like WhatsApp that are common within our communities, that is low effort for them and more accessible, right? So that is one thing that I would give.
Yeah, I'll jump in. We are on 5 social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, very popular. We also have a growing email list. I know email is horrible and the devil, but we send out emails that are important, and we want to make sure that you are abreast of what's going on, especially during session. We have a weekly recap of what happens and what goes down during session. We clip crazy things that the legislators say that, you know, if you're working a job, you don't have time to be watching session 12 hours a day. But we make those clips available for you so you can see what the people that you're voting for are saying. So we make sure that you are keeping abreast of what's going on and what bills are up and what you need to be paying attention to that might affect your life, which is everything. And it's a lot. So we make sure that, you know, we're on it so you don't have to be on it 24/7. I know that, you know, all of our partners here on the panel are the same way, and we work together in coalition with everyone present here to make sure that we're all, everything is covered. Because like I said, there is a lot going on, especially during this time of year, leading into January. It's, you know, Khenia mentioned earlier, it's a budget year. So we break down those things. So make sure that you can understand them because it is a very complicated and tedious process on purpose. But we make sure that we break it down so you can understand what's going on.
I'll chime in last. I'm hoping you guys can't hear the lawnmower in the background, but if so, I'm sorry. Great. I'd say I grew up in poverty as a child, and I've also experienced poverty as an adult. And I think a lot of times there's this saying that people post silence is violence, et cetera. And that's valid. But the truth is, when you're living month to month and when you're struggling, there is already a very limited mental capacity that goes to survival. Talk about mental health. If you don't have food on the table, don't know if you're going to make rent, it's no good counselor in the world that's going to erase that mental health issues. And so I think organizations, especially ones that are serving historically marginalized communities, have a responsibility to connect those communities to the resources they need to survive before asking them to go to a testimony, get out and vote, et cetera. Because that's really when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, survival, physical needs, food, clothing, and shelter, that's what's going to come first before you can even aspire for something different. That said, it's important to ask aspirational questions. Who can we connect with you with? What do you need? So that community members can serve as agents in the creation of their own well-being. But we're all kind of community health workers in the sense of if I see, I just had someone reach out last week who's getting charged with something, and I'm trying to connect them to the resources that they need to survive. We see a lot of transactional relationships in the advocacy space, and many of these organizations aren't really at the forefront of the community, advocating for them, connecting them actually to the resources they need before going to an advocacy day. Beyond the elections, which will be November 7th, there's holding our public officials accountable for these things. And so even if folks can't make it to the testimony, we still have the responsibility to serve as their messengers and to build those authentic relationships.
And I'm going to go a little off script. Speaking of dreaming big and aspirations, right? We're electing a legislature. We're not electing a new governor. So given that, what are you all looking forward to if progressive candidates or, you know, liberal candidates take over the House and the Senate? What are things you think can sort of be worked across those parties, I guess? What are things that we can potentially push through this legislature despite our current predicament with the governorship? I can sort of start with the birth and color perspective. Like, we'd love to pass a stillbirth tax credit, right? We know how many people suffer from stillbirth, and we know that they're not able to get tax breaks the same way you are if you give birth to a baby that draws its first breath. We'd like to get doulas to get covered by insurance, but you know, we'll see where that goes with the legislature as is. But we also want to look at why so many Black and brown women are losing their babies and are losing their pregnancies, because there is a large disproportionate number of folks who are losing their babies in pregnancies. So we want to stand up in fetal and infant mortality review team, and we hope that some of these issues can cross parties. But I know that we will need the support of our allies, partners, and also the community to show really, really why everyone should care about these issues. So what are some of the issues you guys care about that you think there might be some movement? Or even if there's not, why is it worthwhile to bring these issues up in the legislature even during years when they may not pass?
That's a deep question, Galina. I think dreaming big, if we were to get progressive control of both houses this election, I would love to see some of the democracy and voting rights bills that, you know, have been stalled a little bit move forward. There's a new movement on the other side that says that they are supporting early voting and supporting expanding voting rights. I'd like to see them put their money where their mouth is on that. I'd also I'd encourage progressives to dream big. We passed a lot of really good legislation last time we were in control in 2020. I'd like to see some of those things happen again and push through more progressive bills this session. I want us to not be afraid to do that. And I think that if we are successful in that, we will be successful in 2025.
Chime in. One thing that I'm excited about working on is during the pandemic, we saw the mobilization of the community-based workforce, community health workers, do all of this pandemic response and recovery. And now that funding that was prioritized towards them when we needed them most is lapsing and being prioritized towards a more licensed healthcare workforces. I think this is sad because not only does this workforce have the ability to create a return on investment for Medicaid funding, and they do, $2.13 per dollar. It's more than just that. It's about the trust that they have built with the communities leaving with them. And these are often people who are investing a lot of their time taking care of getting other people to their transportation appointments, getting them to the doctor when they're sick, but they don't get, you know, benefits like paid sick leave, et cetera. And so I'm working on, with several other partners, a state plan amendment to create a Medicaid funded benefit for community health workers, but that's just the first step in the process. We still need to retain all of this surplus that we've had in CHWs. We need to keep them in the workforce. And so I still have some work to be done around that, perhaps looking at some other funding models to retain this very important workforce as well. So they're known as your promotoras de salud, your outreach coordinators, your community organizers. Some people are CHWs and don't even realize it. But that's one thing I'll be fighting hard for this session. On another issue that we continue to aspire for, housing's #1 issue right now, just how expensive it's becoming. So we know we'll be pushing for rent stabilization at New Virginia Majority for probably the next decade. But that's the thing I love about my organization is we don't care if it's a politically sexy issue. We're still going to fight for it, and regardless of who's in office.
I would also just chime in to say that I think some of the Latina Institute's priorities, along with those of the Reproductive Justice Coalition that we're in Virginia, the VREA, I think something that was top of mind for 2023 was a Contraceptive Equity Act, and trying to figure out how we can introduce legislation that would provide the full range of reproductive birth control options without being an extra cost to the person asking for it, right? Right now, even on private insurance plans, we know that folks can't get the full range of birth control options, and trying to introduce legislation around that. We weren't successful in 2023. But if we're dreaming big, despite who we have, I think that's something that would be top of mind for the Latina Institute. And then also carrying forward the constitutional amendment that would enshrine bodily autonomy and abortion as a right in the Virginia Constitution. I think those are two really big pieces that were supremely important to the Latina Institute that we would want to bring up again and see passage of. Obviously, the constitutional amendment is a multi-year effort, just given how amendments to the Constitution are made in Virginia. We have to pass it once, wait for an election in between, and then pass it through again through the new legislature. And so it is a multi-year process. And I think having concurrent legislation to that, like Contraceptive Equity Act, and having even like codified decrim brought up, right? And what it looks like to amend the Virginia code to decriminalize abortion because it is criminalized right now. So just looking at that and looking at things that we can push alongside our multi-year constitutional amendment effort would be top of mind right now.
And now, thinking a little bit, since we have a little bit more time, thinking a little bit around kind of, okay, so, you know, we go out, we vote, then we have the legislature, whatever happens there. And then afterwards, throughout the rest of the year, our legislators don't really hear from us, right? City council meetings happen in the put an agenda, nobody shows up. What can people do during that off time? And what can people do during that off time to kind of engage with legislators, engage with our organizations, to keep up the momentum for the following year, to make our voices continuously heard and not just kind of pop up in January, February, and a little bit in March?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that every organization represented on this panel is year-round. So we are in this every day, all the time, year-round. We're making sure that the advocacy is happening. We're making sure that the accountability is happening. And we're making sure that we're turning out our respective audiences when it's time to vote. So yes, the everyday person might not be in it, but there are multiple organizations across the Commonwealth who are in it and who are working for you to make sure that when that time comes and you have the opportunity to make your voice heard, we can do that.
Ditto. New Virginia Majority, we're year-long. During election seasons, we do engage in door knocking, so that phone banking, so that's always an opportunity. We also have a membership model, so you can become a New Virginia Majority member and even engage in endorsements if you're a part of our advisory council and ask candidates the important questions. After the elections, there's still a department for you. You can connect with our community organizing department. And then I would say our policy team in particular, I'm a policy director, was working on a year-long racial equity impact analysis process, and a key to that is community engagement. We'll also be exploring asset-based community development models so that truly we're harnessing the resources of the community and recognizing all of the assets that the community has year-long. So General Assembly session, you know, that's your fall and winter periods, perfect time to engage with our policy department. And then summer, spring, definitely our organizing department, but even our policy department will be stepping up during those seasons too.
I would just echo everything that they're saying. We work all year round, and you can always get involved with us in what we're doing by signing up to also receive alerts with us via our website. We have a newsletter, and we have different ways to get connected once you do sign up. Again, we do year-round engagement, and that's not just to like legislators, but it's also like to other stakeholders. For us, top of mind is always our community and having a community-informed agenda. And so our year-round engagement really centers around the community and the things that they'd like to see and how we can connect them to their own legislators and see how they can advocate on their own. And so I think with that year-round engagement, we're always looking for people to come out and spend some time with us, and to really talk about things that are happening in their own localities, so that way we can just have conversations with stakeholders around the Commonwealth. We just ended a week of action around HEAL, which is federal legislation, HEAL for Immigrant Families Act, and bringing poderosas, who are our activists, out. So really, we do year-round engagement. It's not just around Virginia legislative session, but it's in any quarter, and anyone who's willing to get involved. We'd always love to get involved and see how we can connect people year-round through the engagement that we do.
As far as Birth and Color is concerned, I know folks on this call probably know we do year-round work. We have community engagement efforts happening all the time, regardless of whether or not there's session. And also right now we're working on a telehealth listening project to see kind of where what folks' opinions are about telehealth, what their experiences are, and seeing if there are some policy thoughts coming out of those conversations. If you would like to get involved, please go to our website, sign up for a live session or sign up to fill out a survey. And sign up with us and we will let you know how you can get involved during session, because we will have regular communication during that as well. Thank you everyone who showed up. Thank you to my dear panelists and partners in crime. We are hopefully everyone will have a good weekend canvassing, phone banking, calling your friends, neighbors, and families, and then go out there and vote. Oh, one last thing. Can folks still vote early, and how do they do that? And I'll ask that for LaTwyla and Chloe, our experts.
Yeah, if you have an absentee ballot currently, now is the time to return that ballot in a drop box. We want to make sure that those votes get counted. You can still vote early, but we want to make sure that you show up on election day if you don't vote by this Friday.
All right. Wonderful. Okay, thank you everyone. If anybody has any questions out of the attendees, please pop them in the chat. And if not, we are going to leave it here and let all of us get back to the important work that we're doing.
Thanks, Galina.
Everyone, bye.
Thank you so much, Galina.
Yeah.